Have you noticed that restaurant portions seem to be getting smaller lately? Well, you're not imagining it. There's a fascinating trend happening right now in restaurants across America, and it's changing the way people think about dining out. Hi everyone. Welcome to Lady Show English. I'm so glad you're here today. In this lesson, we're going to explore this trend together. We'll learn useful vocabulary, analyze some interesting phrases, and practice natural English expressions. So let's dive right in. Today's topic comes from a recent business article with the headline "Smaller Portions, the Next Big Trend in Restaurants." This headline immediately caught my attention because it's simple yet powerful. It talks about how smaller food portions are becoming a major trend in restaurants. Now, before we get into the story itself, I want to look at how this headline is structured because it teaches us something important about English writing. The headline uses a colon symbol in the middle, and this is a technique you'll see often in business articles and news reports. When writers use a colon, they're creating a two-part structure. The first part makes a general statement that gets your attention, and the second part after the colon gives you the specific answer or detail. Think of it like this: you make someone curious, then you satisfy their curiosity immediately. For example, I could say the secret to fluent English, daily practice, or the biggest mistake learners make, not speaking enough. See how that works? The colon creates a natural pause and builds a little suspense. This is especially common in headlines, business presentations, and formal writing. Now, the first part of this headline contains a really useful phrase that you'll hear all the time in business English. It's the expression, "the next big thing." When we say something is the next big thing, we mean it's going to be the next major trend or the next popular development in a particular area. You might hear people say AI is the next big thing in education, or what do you think will be the next big thing in fashion? It's a casual but professional way to talk about upcoming trends. So keep this phrase in mind because it's super useful in conversations about business and innovation. Alright, let's move on to the story itself. I'm going to walk you through what's happening in the restaurant industry, and as we go, I'll point out useful vocabulary and expressions. Let me start by giving you some background. There's a very famous restaurant chain in the United States called Olive Garden. Maybe you've heard of it? They're known for Italian-American food, and they're especially famous for two things: unlimited pasta bowls and unlimited breadsticks. Yes, you heard that right, unlimited. You can eat as many breadsticks as you want. For years, this "more is better" approach worked really well for them. But recently, something unexpected happened. The company noticed that some customers were actually asking for less food, not more. This was quite a surprise. So the restaurant decided to try something new. They tested a different approach at about half of their locations. They introduced smaller portions of 7 popular dinner dishes, and of course, they lowered the prices to match. The goal was to attract customers who were worried about money, because let's face it, eating out has become very expensive lately, and many families have been cutting restaurant visits from their budgets. Here's where it gets interesting. The test was a huge success. Customer feedback was really positive, and the company's way of measuring affordability showed a 15% improvement. Even better, early data suggested that these smaller portions weren't just bringing people back to the restaurant once, they were actually turning occasional visitors into regular customers. Now, let me pause here to explain that term. When we call someone a regular, we mean they're a customer who comes frequently and consistently. You might hear a coffee shop owner say, "Oh yes, Sarah is one of our regulars. She comes in every morning." It's a friendly, informal way to describe loyal customers. The CEO of the parent company made a really interesting observation about this change. He said that maybe American consumers have finally evolved beyond the old mindset. In the past, Americans often felt they weren't getting good value unless they had leftover food on their plates. But now, people seem to be happy just eating the right amount and feeling satisfied without waste. He described this as a positive shift away from old American habits. Of course, he also acknowledged that affordability is a big factor too, especially with the economy being challenging for many families right now. So what's driving this trend towards smaller portions? Well, there are really two main reasons, and they're both important. The first reason is economic. Budgets are tight for many people right now. When money is limited, dining out is often one of the first things people reduce or eliminate. Restaurants have noticed fewer customers coming through their doors, which hurts their profits. By offering smaller portions at lower prices, restaurants can compete more effectively with fast food chains, which have been heavily promoting value meals and special deals lately. It's become quite a competitive battle in the food industry. The second reason is that people's eating habits are genuinely changing. There's been real research on this. According to the National Restaurant Association's annual survey, 64% of consumers now replace traditional breakfast, lunch, and dinner with snack items throughout the day. That's a significant majority. Additionally, 74% of restaurant customers say they actually prefer smaller portions. This isn't just about money, it's about how people want to eat. There's also the issue of food waste, which has become a major concern in the restaurant industry. Smaller portions naturally reduce the amount of uneaten food that gets thrown away, which is better for the environment and the restaurant's costs. Now, Olive Garden isn't the only restaurant making these changes. Let me tell you about a couple of other examples. The Cheesecake Factory, which has been offering smaller, lower-calorie versions of their rich dishes since 2011, expanded their value options this past summer. They introduced a new section on their menu called Bites, featuring petite portions priced under $10. The goal was to reverse the negative trend in customer traffic they'd been experiencing. Then there's P.F. Chang's, the popular Asian restaurant chain. Just a couple of weeks ago, they launched a complete overhaul of their menu. Now, let me explain that word overhaul because it's quite useful in business English. An overhaul is a thorough, comprehensive change or improvement of something. We can use it as a noun, like a menu overhaul, or as a verb, like they overhauled their entire system. It suggests more than just minor adjustments, it means a significant renovation or redesign. So what did P.F. Chang's do in their overhaul? They now offer two portion sizes for all their main dishes, traditional size and medium size, which is smaller and cheaper. They're also offering certain appetizers in smaller sizes. Their chief marketing officer explained that today's consumers are looking for ways to enjoy dining out without feeling like they're breaking the bank. That's another great idiom, by the way. When we say something is breaking the bank, we mean it's too expensive or costs more than we can afford. We often use it in the negative form, I want to find a nice hotel without breaking the bank, or let's have fun tonight without breaking the bank. P.F. Chang's, which is known for their family-style portions, meaning large dishes meant for sharing, also introduced lunch and dinner specials earlier this year. These specials include an individual portion of a main dish plus an appetizer and a base, like rice or noodles, all for one fixed price. The marketing officer said their job is to make it easier for customers to discover and customize the different options available. Now, while P.F. Chang's is privately owned and doesn't reveal their earnings publicly, third-party data, meaning information from external research companies, showed that their sales had declined slightly, which likely motivated these major menu changes. There's been some discussion online that these smaller portion trends might be related to the rise of weight loss medications like Wegovy and Ozempic. These drugs have become quite popular recently. However, when asked directly about this, P.F. Chang's marketing officer gave a diplomatic answer. She said they're always watching consumer trends and behavior, and they're simply giving consumers options so everyone can enjoy their restaurant in their own way, on their own terms. Industry experts seem to agree that weight loss drugs probably aren't the main factor behind these menu changes, at least not yet. One consultant pointed out that the reality is only a relatively small percentage of adults are currently using these medications or considering them. While these drugs might significantly alter the food industry in the future, we'd need many more consumers using them before they could have the kind of major impact that some people are attributing to them right now. Beyond affordability and the weight loss drug discussion, industry analysts say that reducing portion sizes is really about restaurants adapting to how consumers are eating and living differently now. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a noticeable shift, especially among younger people, toward what experts call a snack-forward eating pattern throughout the day. Instead of sitting down for 3 traditional meals, many people are grazing on smaller amounts of food more frequently. There's also another important trend that restaurants are just beginning to recognize: the increasing number of people eating alone. This solo dining trend is growing for several reasons. More people are staying single later in life than previous generations. Divorce rates have increased. And there's even a loneliness epidemic affecting people of all ages, particularly seniors, which means more individuals are dining by themselves out of necessity or preference. Industry experts say restaurants aren't fully prepared to address solo dining yet, but they'll need to adapt quickly because it's becoming more common. Making these kinds of menu changes does present challenges for restaurants. However, experts predict that these portion trends will continue to spread because people's eating patterns have shifted significantly from when many of these menus were originally designed. One consultant made an interesting point. She said the food industry has been talking about customization for years. We've facilitated endless customization in many food and beverage categories, allowing people to modify their orders in countless ways. But surprisingly, the industry hasn't really allowed the same flexibility when it comes to portion sizes. She believes that offering customizable portions should be a long-term goal for most restaurant operators. Now, let's take a moment to focus on some key vocabulary from this story, because there are some really useful words and phrases here that you can use in many different contexts. First, let's talk about the word portion. A portion is the amount of food served to one person. You might say this portion is too big for me. Can I get a smaller one? A similar word is serving, which means basically the same thing. These are standard restaurant vocabulary words. Next, we have entree, which is pronounced entree. In American English, an entree means the main dish of a meal, like the primary course. Be careful though, because in British English, entree actually means a starter or appetizer. So the same word means different things depending on which English you're speaking. If you're in an American restaurant and someone asks, "What would you like for your entree?" they're asking about your main course. Let's look at cash-conscious. When we describe someone as cash-conscious, we mean they're careful and thoughtful about spending money. It's similar to budget-conscious or cost-aware. For example, cash-conscious shoppers always look for sales and discounts before buying. There's a useful phrase pattern here too: cut something from one's budget. This means to stop spending money on something in order to save. You might say, "I had to cut streaming services from my budget to save money," or "Many families are cutting restaurant visits from their budgets." The pattern is, cut plus the thing plus from plus budget. We already talked about regular as a noun meaning a frequent customer, but let me give you another example. A cafe owner might say, "I know all my regulars by name. They come in every single day." The verb embrace is quite formal and useful in business contexts. When you embrace something, you accept and support it enthusiastically. For example, many restaurants have embraced digital menus and online ordering. A more formal synonym would be adopt. We covered overhaul, which means a complete change or improvement. And we discussed breaking the bank, meaning spending too much money, usually used negatively like without breaking the bank. Let me also share some useful word combinations, what we call collocations or chunks. These are words that native speakers naturally use together, and learning them as phrases rather than individual words will make your English sound more natural. In business and trend discussions, you'll hear expressions like reverse negative trends, which means to change bad patterns into good ones. Or traffic trends, which in restaurant terminology refers to patterns in customer visits. You'll also hear third-party data, meaning information from external sources rather than from the company itself. In restaurant language, we have some specific combinations. Family-style portions describes large portions meant for sharing among a group. Fixed price means a set price that doesn't change, like in a prix-fixe menu. A seated meal refers to a formal meal eaten at a table, as opposed to grab-and-go food. And solo eaters describes people who eat alone. When talking about change and adjustment, useful chunks include adapt to changes, which means to adjust to new situations. The phrasal verb rollout is an informal business term meaning to introduce or launch something new, like they're rolling out a new menu next month. We also have attributed to, which means caused by or related to, as in the change is attributed to shifting consumer preferences. And factor into means to influence or affect, like many considerations factor into menu design. I want to briefly touch on a grammar point that you might have noticed in the original article. There's frequent use of the present perfect tense to talk about recent changes and trends. For example, you might see sentences like the restaurant has introduced new options or there has been a shift in eating habits. We use present perfect when we want to connect the past to the present. These changes started in the past, but they're still relevant and continuing now. The pattern is subject plus have or has plus the past participle. So if I want to talk about recent changes, I'd say fast food chains have embraced value meals recently or eating habits have changed significantly. This tense is perfect for discussing trends because trends are ongoing processes that started before now and continue into the present. Let me also point out something interesting about formal versus informal English. In written articles and business reports, the language tends to be more formal and sophisticated. But when we speak, especially in casual conversation, we often say the same thing in a simpler way. For instance, a formal article might say, consumers tend to replace 3 traditional meals with snack items. But in conversation, you'd probably just say people are eating snacks instead of regular meals. Same meaning, different style. Or formally, the restaurant chain tested a new menu section. Informally, the restaurant tried out a new part of their menu. Here's a good practice for you. If you see the formal sentence, operators will need to address this trend quickly. How would you make it more casual? You might say restaurant owners will need to deal with this trend soon. See how we simplified operators to restaurant owners and changed address to deal with? That's the kind of adjustment that makes language feel more conversational. Before we wrap up, I want to share a quick cultural observation because I think this story tells us something interesting about changing attitudes in America. Traditionally, American restaurants were world famous for their enormous portions. People expected a lot of food for their money, and it was completely normal to take leftover food home in what Americans call doggy bags, even though the food is for the person, not actually for their dog. The whole culture was based on quantity and abundance. But now we're seeing a real shift in attitudes. More and more Americans value quality over quantity. They care about reducing waste. They're more health conscious. And of course, with economic pressures, affordability matters more than ever. This reflects bigger changes in American society, growing environmental awareness, increased focus on health and wellness, and the practical economic challenges many families are facing. It's fascinating to watch these cultural shifts happen in real time. This makes me curious, how are restaurant portions in your country? Are they generally large or moderate? Are they getting bigger or smaller? I'd love to hear your observations in the comments below because food culture varies so much around the world. Alright everyone, that brings us to the end of today's lesson. We've covered a lot of ground today. We explored an important trend in the restaurant industry, learned useful business vocabulary, practiced analyzing headline structures, and discussed some natural English expressions that you can use in many different situations. I hope you found this helpful and interesting. Before you go, quick intro. At Lady Show English, I share real-world English from news and articles on health, food, travel, business, tech, and more, so you can actually use it in daily life. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up to help other learners find it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, so you won't miss any future lessons. Can't wait to see you in the next one. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I really appreciate your dedication to improving your English. Keep learning, keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Until then, take care and bye for now.